Welcome back to podcast 32 of 2019. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill. You can tweet us at The Odds Breakers. Follow us on social media / The Odds Breakers. This episode is being sponsored by MyBookie.ag. For a 50% sign-up bonus, please visit MyBookie. Use the promo code TheOddsBreakers. Terms and conditions apply. If you'd like to help us out and sponsor our podcast, we would love to help you out. Please visit theoddsbreakers.com, click shop, and become a member for only $12.99 a month. You can get my picks and premium picks before the line moves for $2 more. You get all that, plus the podcast a little bit early by clicking on the patron button. And if nothing else, please visit theoddsbreakers.com and become a free picks newsletter subscriber. It is 4th of July week, my friends, and I want to, of course, say happy 4th of July to all of you. Happy Independence Day. I love this holiday. It says it's got summer written all over it. Hopefully you have some fun things to do. Get out and grill. Go find some water to swim in, or obviously go watch some sports, whatever you fancy. Make sure you have a great time. Be safe and enjoy the 4th of July. My kids happen to love it. They love the fireworks. I can't wait to relax and kind of decompress this weekend. We have a fantastic show for you guys today, and hopefully some of our guests could keep you entertained throughout this weekend, because we have Paul Napier to break down some NASCAR plays for Saturday night for the Coke Zero Sugar 400. And we have our buddy Cub Fan Danny back to discuss the huge fights in UFC 239. You got Amanda Nunez facing Holm, and you got Jon Jones facing Thiago Santos. It's going to be a fantastic pay-per-view event. I cannot wait to watch it. All right, let's get right into this weekend's plays for the Coke Zero 400 with Mr. Paul Napier. And now I am very happy to welcome Paul Napier, a NASCAR fan and handicapper who has been capping some of these races at theoddsbreakers.com. Please follow him on Twitter at OhioSportFan740. How you doing, Paul?
I am excellent, Kiev. Thank you very much for having me on.
Hey man, you've been killing it so far in NASCAR. You haven't had a losing week yet. I hope some of our listeners and subscribers have been able to jump on some of that. That's fantastic work you're doing there. And
Thank you.
You know, it's summer. Obviously the big football and basketball isn't going on, but that doesn't mean you can't have some fun watching some sports. And
absolutely.
And let's just get right into it then. What got you into NASCAR? Was it something kind of you were born into?
No, not really. Realistically, it's just, I'm from Ohio. It's typically not a NASCAR area. Actually, kind of grew up with IndyCar is actually my original background. And then, the thing is, you watch it, just like I think when you get, a specific sports team. If you're from Ohio, you've got to be a Browns fan, that type of thing. Well, it's because they're on, I think, and you're immersed in that type of culture. Well, IndyCar falls off. They had the split and went IndyCar and what was it? IRL, the Indy Racing League. And when that split, that really hurt the IndyCar series. Well, then NASCAR starts to come up in the early 2000s, and I always kind of made fun of NASCAR actually, but kind of got hooked in back in about 2000 actually. It was on every week, especially this time during the summer. It's real slow. and kind of just started following it. So I think that's kind of what kind of drove me into it, actually. That and not really, didn't really have wasn't much of a baseball fan at that point. It kind of killed, with the I kind of lost interest after the strike in '94, was it? And then the steroid thing, that was ridiculous.
Right.
But anyways, came full circle, and then kind of, as time progressed, started, looking in and how to, have some fun with it, put a little money and on some of these races and that. So, but I mean, I don't know if I've said this in any of my posts. I am a Kevin Harvick guy, but I, realistically, the older I get, it's, there's several drivers, but Harvick is my driver. I just thought I'd throw that in there. But anyways, that's kind of how I got into NASCAR.
No, that makes sense. You've been a fan a long time then, since 2000. And Harvick, how long's Harvick been racing?
2001.
Well, there you go.
He took over. Yeah, he took over when Dale Earnhardt was killed after the last lap in the Daytona 500 in 2001. Richard Childress tapped Harvick, who was at the time was in the Busch series, and brought him up to replace Dale Sr. And I was kind of that Dale Sr., Dale Jr., guy, and I think it just kind of evolved and went in and started following Harvick and have ever since. So.
Well, that's awesome, man. And yeah, obviously tragedy kind of brought you to him with that. I remember like it was yesterday when that happened.
Yeah.
And, that's just, people can't forget how dangerous the sport can be. But then again, there's a lot of sports out there like that. But I guess that probably brings a certain type of fandom there that has a greater respect for it. So that's that's really interesting. Well, can you explain to our listeners how NASCAR is usually bet or handicapped? What are the kind of plays out there that are available?
Sure. I'll start with what I like. What I like to bet is it's a driver matchup or a head-to-head. That's kind of what I've been posting to the odds breakers. It's similar to a money line baseball bet where it doesn't matter if your driver, the person that you're picking, wins. It's where they finish, and if they finish ahead of the person that you're head-to-head against.
Sure. So
basically, and what it'll be is, say you have a line of it's Jimmy Johnson, at minus 170 versus Kevin Harvick at plus 135. And it's, like I said, it's very similar to money line in baseball. If you had $170 to bet on Jimmy Johnson, you win $100 if he won. While if you bet $100 on Kevin Harvick, that payout would be $135.
Gotcha.
So those are the type of props I like, and I'll call it a prop. That's kind of my. I think that's where you're not picking a driver versus the field. It's driver versus driver.
Is driver versus the field available for to win, play, show, like horse betting, or maybe I'm sure there's going to be some odds 10-1 for a driver to finish a race, right?
Right. You can get into odds as well. It'll be like a 3-1, and it just start through, but that's odds to win usually. I'm not really familiar with like the win, play, show, if there is something like that or not. I'm sure there is out there. It's just something it's very difficult for one to pick a winner of a race because there's so many things that, can, that have an effect on the outcome of a race.
A lot of variance.
So that's more difficult. I would think that would be even more difficult. I mean, it's just like in horse racing where you're doing that, but I think it's even that much more because it's not just NASCAR and racing in general is not just focused on that driver. There's a lot, you got a crew chief calling the race on the pit box. You have a pit crew, and if those things, and believe me, like I said, I am a Harvick fan, and I've watched him lose about 8 races over the last 2 years due to either a poor pit call or, they don't get a tire on, so that's why I like, if I'm betting on, if I'm going to be putting some, put a wager in NASCAR, I like the head-to-head matchup.
No, that makes sense. And there's head-to-heads in horse racing too, but like you said, way more variance because first of all, the race takes hours. Horse racing is 2 minutes max.
Right.
And obviously, not a lot of things can happen minus a horse getting bumped or pushed back. Usually, if there's a great horse, he's really favored to win. But yeah, I can see a pit, somebody falling down, a wreck in front of you that you couldn't avoid wasn't your fault. Oh my goodness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I love how you attack that with the matchups there. It makes a lot of sense, and it's just like a money line. So let's get into the Coke Zero Sugar 400. Can you give us a brief history on this race coming up, I believe, Saturday, July 6th?
Yes, I can try to. Let's see here. We'll call it the sister race to the Daytona 500. Everybody's heard of the Daytona 500, which is the start of the year. The Daytona 400, actually, I did a little bit of research. It's a Daytona 400, or like I said, the Coke Zero Sugar 400.
It's a weird name because it says sugar. It says sugar, yet it's Coke Zero. It's like, what were you trying to tell me here?
So it's and it used to be the Firecracker 400. It's always been centered around the 4th of July until 2020, and I can get into that. But anyways, it was born out of, they were going to race Indy cars in 1959 at Daytona. Right around the 4th of July. And I think it was 2 people that were actually killed in practice. And they were, like I said, they were going to run Indy cars, if I get this correct. And so they scrapped it and said, no, we're not going to do it. Well, Bill France, the president of NASCAR, never shied away of trying to make money and built the sport to what it is today. Said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna capitalize on this. We'll run Daytona July 4th, centered around. We're gonna run it and have fireworks and all that. But it was only a 100-lap race at that time, so it was actually I can't remember the exact name, but it was something. It was 250, and that was kind of how that started. It's always been, like I said, it's always been around July 4th. It's always coincided. It was where Richard Petty won his 200th race in 1984, and where President Reagan came in on a plane and watched some of the race. So it's kind of had more of it's got some pomp and circumstance. Nothing to the effect of the Daytona 500, but still, it's Daytona. It's if you win at Daytona, it doesn't matter if it's the Xfinity Series or the trucks or Cup or whatever. I mean, it's huge.
Well, the same track, right?
Yeah, same track.
So that's interesting.
Same track.
And nothing changed there. Obviously, horse tracks change when people do that. There's turf races. They shorten it.
Right.
The post gates are moved. Lots of different things happen. But it looks like this is kind of just like the Daytona 500 with 400 laps.
Yeah, 400 miles.
So what gives a driver a competitive advantage to this race? Is it the car? Is it the crew? The experience?
That's a good question. This is actually, this week is kind of I like to look at this as a little bit of a crapshoot. This is where everybody is all on a more of an equal playing field, I feel, because the draft is so important in plate racing or the tapered spacer racing as it is now. So you can have a car that may not have as much horsepower as one of the, the bigger